Oh, yeah. Welcome back. How you guys doing? Happy Friday to you. Welcome back to the Combat Footage Show. I'm Ronnie. I'll be your host again. I think we're just going to call it the Combat Footage Show. You know, we've been going back and forth for months now on what it is that we should call this from a branding perspective, but ultimately we do combat footage, and that's what it is. So, do me a favor, tap the like button, drop in the comments, let me know where you guys are chiming in from. We love it, and we love to see you. Welcome back. What's going on, guys? How we doing? Ohio, Las Vegas, Maine. Welcome in Harrisburg, Charlotte, North Carolina. What's happening, Ronnie? Hanging out here with you, man. That's how I like my Fridays. Sweden, Virginia. Welcome in from Virginia. Iceland, Dublin, Birmingham. Where you at? Come on, drop it in the chat. All right. Hell yeah, guys. It's good to see you. You know, like I said, welcome back to another week of the show, if you will. You know, I want to talk just for a few moments before we get into the footage that we have for tonight. And I do anticipate that tonight's show is going to take us almost 2 hours to get through. I kind of got carried away with taking down different footage that I thought was going to be relevant and pertinent. We are still, of course, going to get to our top 10. That is ultimately what the meat and potatoes of the show is supposed to be, is what is everybody watching on the Funker 530 app and website. But We've got quite a few different things around the world that I want to talk about. You know, at some point tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit about Kosovo and the NATO troops that were attacked there, with a little bit of, you know, at least broad brush stroke understanding of why that's happening. We're going to, of course, be talking about Ukraine situation there. The situation specifically there that we're going to cover before we get to the top 10 is going to be the raids into Belgorod. And, you know, a little bit of speculation on my part of, you know, why that's interesting and why that continues to be interesting. But we're also going to see some funny stuff tonight. We'll see some not safe for work stuff tonight. But the admin note that I kind of wanted to talk about is right now we're presently working through a backlog of about 2,000 videos. So on the back end, you know, pulling back the curtain for you for a second, of Funker 530, there's somewhere close to 5,000 videos that we have currently hosted on the site. A small portion of those, somewhere between 700 and 1,200 videos, we're still trying to move from our old player. So here's why that's relevant. On our YouTube, on our Twitter, you're going to find us posting some of that historical footage because it's still in certain circumstances relevant, right? We also think it's neat footage. You know, we've got a lot of new community members that have joined over the last year. Funker has been around for a long time. But a couple examples of some of that historical footage is we just put out a really awesome video of a really interesting radio comms between an A-10 and a ground element requesting close air support from the A-10. And you could see the A-10's gun run, and you can hear the relief in the ground element. You know, it's footage like that, you know, we have always been known for. And over the last year and a half or so, it's been really heavily Ukraine footage, and we're going to continue to cover that stuff because we do cover war. But expect to see a lot of additional footage across all of our socials as well. That's something that I personally am working quite heavily on. You know, so you'll find that stuff primarily on Twitter and here on YouTube as uploads. Today, I want to say we just released one of a high altitude, high opening jump from either the 3rd or the 7th Special Forces group, not sure which. I've got some videos from the 3rd group, and I've got videos from the 7th group that I'm currently working on where to post right now. But that's the note that I wanted to let you guys know about, is there's going to be a lot more raw coming back to the YouTube to accompany the live show. Not necessarily all just Ukraine footage. One of the problems we're running into with posting Ukraine footage specifically to YouTube is YouTube appears to have their eye on us very, very intently, especially with the type of footage that we, you know, talk about both on this show as well as upload raw. So those, you know, heavier, you know, pieces of footage that really showcase the brutality and reality of war, you'll always find that stuff on the app. Anyway, it's good to see you. Welcome back. Changed up the background just a little bit, you know. I think it looks pretty good. Kind of decluttered it. I want to get started tonight, though, and I want to start the night talking a little bit about Belgorod. The Freedom of Russia Legion along with the Russian Volunteer Corps, continue to make raids into Belgorod in multiple locations, and they're continuing to release footage of those raids. One of the Russian Volunteer Corps most recent compilation videos is the video we're about to watch here. But we're going to dive down into a couple different locations outside of Grayvoron that these Ukrainian-backed Russians continue to apply pressure on Russia in. Check this out. Now, it's important to note that some of this might be from last week. Some of it's going to be a little bit more recent. You'll recognize the Grayvoron checkpoint here, but we're going to see some more recent stuff. Just wanted to make sure and cover this one right out of the gate. It's 7th. Thanks, Zerm. Appreciate it. 7234. Yeah, I just couldn't recall. Again, I'm working on a video. I actually think I released the third group video on Twitter. Now that I think about it, I just couldn't remember which one had gone where. Appreciate you, man.
Ебать, вот это прилетело.
Those strikes we looked at last week. What is the status right now on the border? Tom has a question there. That's something we're going to kind of be examining a little bit. Ukraine, or these Ukrainian-backed Russians, I would say, if we're to believe what we're being told, continue to cross the border into Belgorod, continue to conduct raids. Where that starts to get really interesting, and this video is over, but where that starts to get really interesting is the ground lines of communication that run through Belgorod and provide essential support, critical support to Russian lines in Crimea Svatova. Svatova more specifically being further to the north. We've talked before about Crimea Svatova. It's an area that I've kind of been banging on the table, asking folks to keep an eye on, especially relative to the amount of tension that's been the amount of attention that's been provided to Bakhmut, especially in media circles. Bakhmut. There are quite a few that believe that Crimea Svatova could be a potential location for this, whatever this counteroffensive major effort from Ukraine could be. Now, as a little bit of speculation here, continued pressure like this on Russian lines in Belgorod could be one misdirection, aligning eyes to the north while Ukraine postures in the south. There have been reports of buildups of Ukrainian and Western provided aid operated by Ukrainians near Zaporizhia. That's an area that I've mentioned before as a possible location for a counteroffensive. On the other hand, these raids into Belgorod, and we're going to go through quite a bit of footage here in a moment, could effectively be some level of disruption against supply lines, ground lines of communication that route through Belgorod, providing support to that northernmost front for Russia. Let's take a look at some more footage here. Also out of Grayvoron, what appears to be Grad artillery. Coming up for you now. It is Grad artillery, not appears. Gonna keep the sound off on this one, just from a copyright perspective. Just a reminder, all of this next footage that we're going to be watching here takes place in Russia. Yeah, that's definitely copywritten. All right, let's bring it back up. But that's not the only location. So that was Grayvoron there. That's the location of that checkpoint that was assaulted, taken, and then Freedom of Russia, made their way a few clicks inland into Belgorod last week. And we talked about that last week. What's most interesting to me, though, is the themes that are, emanating from both, quote, sides. On the one hand, pro-Russian accounts are kind of laughing at it. It's not successful. We keep repelling it. On the other hand, pro-Ukrainian sources are saying, well, we continue to do it. And they're not wrong. Russia does keep repelling it. But that is effectively what a harassing technique is you enter, harass, and leave. Now, pro-Ukrainian sources kind of continue to claim that there are next to no casualties taking place. Russia continues to claim that they kill every single one that crosses a border. The simple fact that it continues to happen, like what's taking place in Shebekino here, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, indicates that they're not all. Russia didn't kill all of them. Coming up for you guys right now. Hold on, I got multiple videos playing at once here. This is the problem with having so many tabs open. Here we go. This is specifically the Russian Volunteer Corps, based on that logo there. Logos are very different between the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Freedom of Russia Legion. But there's more. Shebekino. Coming up now. Smoke on the horizon from artillery strikes. This would be Freedom of Russia Legion, down here in the bottom right. And more yet. Buildings on fire, which I think we might have a video from inside of this building. I can't confirm that that's the case, but you'll see what I mean when we get to that video here in just a second. Now, something that I'm not entirely sure of is what the purpose of this building is. A lot of Russian flags outside of it, somewhat indicative of some type of governmental purpose, but it also looks very much so like it could be some form of an apartment building, right? Just thinking about how, our office buildings would have flags, listed out in front of them like that. There might be somebody in the chat, and feel free to jump in and let me know if you're tracking what the purpose of that building was. This next one, though, is the view from inside of a building, supposedly in Shebekino. That could very well be that building. City administration, thanks, Isaac. Government building? Tracking. Got it. Nice work, guys. All right, let's bring this back up because we're not done. We're not done. There's quite a bit of footage coming out of Shebekino. This one was interesting to me. Pretty standard tactic, but it made its way really far across the internet. One of the emergency measures that you take in a secure compartmented information facility in a SCIF is if in the worst case you need to evacuate because it could potentially be overrun, you burn everything. That's exactly what Russia's doing here. Burning documents. Let's bring it back up. But it's not just Shebekino. Novaya Tavolzhanka, Tavolzhanka, I think I got that right, is also an area where the Freedom of Russia Legion has been found raiding. Now, Russia's not just sitting by while this happens, right? So the way border security works is you don't just have this massive, huge fortified line. There are small elements that are employed forward with reserve elements in some form of a response capacity further to the rear. Russia actually has been striking the Freedom of Russia Legion quite regularly during these raids. This supposedly is one video of one of those strikes near Shebekino. Copyrighted music. Big bada boom. What country, Sid has a question there, what country are Freedom of Russia supporting? Well, I mean, I guess that depends on how you look at it. Obviously, they are fighting with Ukrainian backing right now, and, you know, there's very little information that we have as to whether or not Ukrainians are actually fighting with them. If you ask a pro-Russian account, they would say absolutely. If you ask a pro-Ukrainian account, they would say hell no. But it really depends on how you look at it. Some have posited that this Freedom of Russia Legion and Russian Volunteer Corps are not necessarily pro-Ukraine, though I have seen the Russian Volunteer Corps flying a Ukrainian flag, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But regardless, I've heard they are anti-Putin and, generally pro-Russia, pro-freedom of Russia, if you will. Regardless, the reason I put it in the title the way that I did, Ukraine continues to raid Russia, is the equipment that they're using is, Western modern equipment that's been provided to Ukraine for Ukraine to use to fight back against Russia. And in fact, the United States actually came out and mentioned, whether or not they follow through with that is an entirely different question, that they would be conducting some form of an investigation as to whether or not, quote, American equipment or American provided, now Ukrainian equipment, because once again, if I give you this cup of coffee, it is now your cup of coffee. So it is Ukrainian equipment now, has been used, which it has, with video evidence. One more video I wanted to show you relative to the Freedom of Russia Legion is this one. There's a possibility that they even have captured a T-90. And that Stora system there, right on the front, is a countermeasure system. On both sides. We've gone over the Stora before. Oh, we'll be going over that one, the NATO being attacked in Kosovo here in just a little bit. We've got quite a bit more Ukrainian footage to go over here. So that's really what I wanted to cover and talk a little bit about relative to these Belgorod incursions. Is on the one hand, and I've mentioned this before, to me it feels almost as though it's some form of a misdirection, diversion of eyes to the north. But there's also the likelihood that it could be setting conditions in the north by pressuring Russian supply lines that route through Belgorod to that Svatovo-Kremina line that we've talked about pretty heavily before. Most of the footage that we've seen from a Russian perspective to come out of Svatovo-Kremina has been really heavily Spetsnaz, VDV. We've seen Terminator footage, some of the relatively rare footage we have of the BMPT Terminator, I want to say is the right acronym for it, acronym soup, has been from Kremina. So fighting's been very heavy there, and I think a lot of it's overshadowed by the amount of coverage on Bakhmut. But I've got more Ukrainian footage, not necessarily in a specific location, but I just thought this stuff was interesting for you. Coming up here is skeet shooting, Ukrainian style. Take a look at this. Buy a shotgun. Well, now, from my perspective here, I don't know that was the shotgun that actually took that thing out. It seems like it's pretty far away, and there's a lot of rifle fire happening. The pattern at that distance, especially on birdshot, is going to be pretty broad. But there's still a chance. All right, let's bring it back up. Now, I've got one here, and we're actually going to see kind of two perspectives of what it's like to take a trench. This first one is going to be Ukrainians actually succeeding in taking a Russian trench. Later on, when we get to the top 10, we're going to see what that looks like when it fails. Trench warfare being what it is, it's going to be tough to watch when we get there. Coming up for you now, discretion relatively advised. Oh. We're going to keep the sound off on this one. This comes, I believe, from the 3rd Brigade of Azov. That's going to mean and put this in a general location of southwest of Bakhmut. We'll also see more video from them when we get to the top 10. All right. Let's bring it back up here. And I chose to, I have a non-Ukraine topic before we get to the top 10, and it's going to be Kosovo that we're going to get into. But I chose to cover all of the Ukrainian stuff up front. So these are those videos that I thought are interesting, that provide context or perspective. The specific context and perspective that I'm hoping to provide by choosing this video amongst the, hundreds of videos that we've posted since we last spoke to each other last week, is that the fight in southwestern Bakhmut is still absolutely taking place. This next one here, going to be difficult to watch. You're going to see a Ukrainian APC that's loaded up, not only internally, but with troops on top that gets hit by a Russian anti-tank guided missile. Discretion's advised. Coming up. I don't have a great location for this one. Somewhere in Ukraine. Compiled Tech. Thank you very much. I'll read that one out here in just a second. Let's bring it up. Compiled Tech, thanks for the $4.99. Can you say happy birthday, Omar? Happy birthday, Omar. My lovely Iraq translator, he a fan and watching. Well, thanks for watching, Omar. Thanks for being here. Board, thank you for becoming a member. Welcome to the Funkers. Gunslinger, thanks for the 762. Not sure what you mean by should we be worried about ammo drying up. Winnie the Pew, thank you very much for becoming a member. Appreciate that. Vic, thank you for becoming a member. Zilla1414, thanks for the 5. I know what you're going to say, but happy birthday. It's not my birthday. I did actually come to realize that my birthday does fall, my actual birthday does fall on a Funker stream night. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting night, to say the least. Liam, thank you very much for becoming a member. Welcome, guys. All right, this one's an interesting one. This one takes place, I believe, inside of Bakhmut. What you're going to see here is effectively some of the challenges of IFF. You know, whether you want to call it fog of war that contributed to it, lack of communication, what have you. I'll let you watch it, then we'll talk about it. You're going to be looking at Wagner, though. Friendly fire, Gracious. It's actually where I was just about to take us. Gracious says, friendly fire happens all the time, nothing special. So we've watched footage quite a bit from both sides. We just watched, Wagner essentially opening up on other Wagner employees, troops. I'll just say employees. But we've seen footage of Ukrainians. More specifically, there's footage of a Foreign Legion team, I believe. They might not have been Foreign Legion, assaulting a house that housed reportedly Spetsnaz. I have no idea who was actually inside of the house. But one of the things that still sticks out to me, lives rent-free in my head movies, is one of those foreign volunteer soldiers, whether, I'm not sure if they had a contract with Ukraine's military or not, says out loud, "Don't shoot me." Friendly fire is something that happens quite a bit. I did a edited video once of a National Guard team that opens up on, friendly Americans. It is something that happens, but it's one of the reasons that people talk about the fog of war so much, right? Effective communication, critical. DC Williams, thank you for $100. That's a lot of dollars. Thank you for that. Goodness. Wow. I wish I had better words to thank you for it. Steve, thank you for the $5. At this point, do you think it'd be a good idea to send U.S. troops to Ukraine? No. Why or why not? Because the United States has not been attacked by Russia. to that respect, it's not our fight. Right? So providing arms and armor to Ukraine, in my mind, is a different story. Right? You can consider that escalatory if you'd like to. I don't. Russia is receiving arms from its allies, from its partners. We are providing the same. I consider those two things very different. A lot of people will collate those into one argument, right? That U.S. troops fighting on ground is no different or the same as providing arms to Ukraine. Now, there are United States troops on ground in Ukraine. The United States has admitted that. I want to say it's to the tune of something like 14 logisticians and inspectors to primarily make sure that the equipment provided to Ukraine is being used for the purposes that it was meant for. Right. Generally speaking, providing Ukraine the means with, brass knuckles and baseball bats to defend themselves on the subway, I am supportive of. When it comes to economic aid, when it comes to, checks outside of military equipment, that's where I start to waver a little bit. Right. There are a lot of challenges and problems here in the United States, especially relative to the amount of just issues that we have. I don't want to dive too far down into politics. That's where I start to waver. I've mentioned that before, and I've talked about it before. One of the major issues that I think folks have in the provision of arms to Ukraine is they see a dollar value and see that to be a check. An overwhelming amount of the aid that we have provided thus far has been in the form of equipment. This is equipment that in most circumstances, most, not all, is antiquated. It's been replaced. This is stuff that the United States Army is phasing out, and it would be sitting on a lot somewhere. The Humvee is a great example of that. The Humvee is getting phased out right now, and it was designed for the Eastern European theater. What better place for it to go? All right, let's move on, though. Speaking of volunteers, we've got some footage of Belarusian volunteers engaging Russian positions with a DsHKA or DsHKM. Video's coming up for you guys now. Also Klingons. Robert, thanks for hitting the support button. All right, let's bring it back up. A few more support that I need to read through here. Oscar, thank you for the $10. Hey, bro, happy birthday. At this point, I'm like 5,000 years old. Thank you for the $10, sir. Cool YouTube channel. Yep, we're a team. I'm just a small part of that team that happens to be the one that invested in a studio to go live. That's the only reason I'm doing this. Not Josh, not Will, not Funker, Cole, any of our team members. We all have our own little pieces to this that we play. But thank you very much for the $10. DC, thank you again for the $100. Wow. Goodness. Now, before I move into the conversation about Kosovo, and we've got more Ukraine footage coming up here in just a second, especially once we get into the top 10, I would like to put out a call for somebody to go to Ukraine and get me my AK back, because these dudes absolutely stole my AK. This is what happens when Gen Z goes to war. Look at this damn thing. Ooh woo. Imagine getting smoked by that thing. All right, let's bring it back up. Yeah. That one we uploaded that one just a few minutes before the stream tonight. That one was good. Oh, there's one more. There's one more that I wanted to show you. Something that I follow quite a bit. And I forgot to add this one to the stream description, but it's right on the homepage. Something that I follow quite a bit on Instagram is some of the volunteer EOD technicians that are providing aid to Ukraine. The amount of mines, the amount of booby traps that are being encountered across Ukraine right now is innumerable in my mind. This video is really interesting. What you're going to see here is a booby-trapped Mon 50, which is essentially the Soviet equivalent to the Claymore. Normally, Claymores and Mon 50s are designed to be relatively easy to defuse. It's not a bug, it's a feature because it's a defensive postured weapon. So what you want to be able to do is emplace it, and when it's time for you to move, easily defuse it and move. Check this out. Button. So as he pulls that out, that circuit gets closed, which would set this off. That would be your typical way of defusing or rendering the Claymore safe. Thought that was an interesting video. All right, let's bring it up. Compiled Tech, thanks for the $5. Hello Kitty, Modern Combat Division. Yeah, it's a Call of Duty skin. You know, it's what happens when Gen Z goes to war. That's what that is to me. I don't know. Give me a nice woodland pattern AK with a Neotech on the top of it and a dong grip and a suppressor. That's something that actually caught me off guard. Is I didn't expect to see the amount of suppressors that we see being used in Ukraine right now. They're everywhere. That's one of the major support items I see being provided by volunteer organizations is suppressors. Thought that was interesting. Dong grip? Oh yeah. Google Dong AK. That's a good-looking beast right there. I want to talk a little bit about Kosovo. Now, the title says very specifically, NATO forces were attacked in Kosovo. That's not clickbait. That happened. What we're going to see here is some form of a spokesman from KFOR, NATO forces in Kosovo, describing that attack. Very interesting video. We're going to talk about why-ish, at least at the top level, because this goes way back. And what's going to be really interesting about this is we're going to see some contextually rich parallel footage, historical footage from Kosovo to go along with it.
Myself, injured K4 soldiers with shock bombs that were attached to glass bottles with small BB pellets and either alcohol or some type of fuel to cause a fire. 25 K4 soldiers were injured.
Sorry, can you repeat? I have phone.
25 K4 soldiers were injured. Some of them have gunshot wounds. Let me say that again. Some K4 soldiers were injured by gunfire. My own eyes, I found a bullet not far from where we talked on Monday night. A bullet that had been fired from a gun. It has the markings, the spiral markings on it from a barrel that only comes when fired. That bullet can only be fired by guns
Sa oružjem
that no one in NATO has
da niko sa nekog
here in
nema.
KFOR.
Da niko sa nekog ima, ali to oružje ima recimo
The guns that fire that bullet
puška koja ispaljuje
not here on Monday.
nije bilo ponedjeljkom.
That bullet somehow was.
Je bio.
I have soldiers, KFOR soldiers, that are pulling bullets out of their equipment.
Ima smo njih koji su radili nekoj iz njihove.
This is absolutely unacceptable.
To je apsolutno nedopustivo.
All right, let's talk about that. So first off, let's cover who KFOR is. KFOR is essentially NATO's force in Kosovo. Back in 2008, Kosovo essentially declared its independence from Serbia. The majority, ethnic majority in Kosovo is Albanian. And there's actually a really weird, pro-American culture in Kosovo, to the point to where they like idolize Bill and Hillary Clinton. You go to the water parks or you look at the water parks and they're wearing American flag swim trunks, and they have, administrative buildings that are designed after the United States Capitol. It's weird to see, first and foremost. The majority of Kosovo are ethnically Albanian. In the north of Kosovo, however, the minority is the majority, and those are Serbians, Serbs. Over the last couple weeks, Serbs have been violently demonstrating against elections, local elections in 4 municipal districts. I actually had a video that broke all of this down, but it got copyright struck. We'll talk more about that copyright strike when we get to number 2 on our top 10 list. These local elections were boycotted by the Serbs. I want to say only 3%, somewhere around there, of the Serbian population in these areas turned out to vote. Ethnically Albanian mayors were elected for political office, largely because of that boycott. The demonstrations spun up very rapidly from the Serbs, and in some cases blocking the political office, the administrative buildings where those, and I don't recall if they are all mayors, but at least one was an Albanian mayor, blocking those newly elected officials from taking office. In the process of blocking that, Kosovo responded with, quote, tear gas. This was actually released by RT. Coming up for you now. Looks to me more like mace or bear spray. Regardless, they used force to take those buildings back. Now, some of the violence, and more specifically the attacks on KFOR, included explosives, like you heard the spokesman for KFOR mention. According to him, gunfire as well. Here is some of that violence. You can see and hear those explosives going off. I've got another video for you. This is once again some of RT's footage. Then we'll talk about the last piece of footage that you'll have to go to the website to watch so that we don't get copyright stricken. Check this out.
Just one question. Please, please.
U.S. soldier there. Part of KFOR. All right, let's bring it up. Now, Serbia hasn't been very quiet in all of this. In fact, there's footage of Serbia moving military equipment to the border with Kosovo. We'll get to a statement from the United States here in just a second. Here's some footage of those Serbian convoys moving towards the border. I don't know if that's copyrighted. I'm going to keep it off, though. Let's bring it up. So the United States actually put out a statement on this. You know, for those that are, this is NATO's fault. Well, the United States actually decried Kosovo for taking forceful action against the Serbian protesters. What's interesting, what's most interesting about the 2008 split from Serbia is that Serbians did not have any involvement in that split. KFOR itself, I see a lot of questions in the chat. What's NATO doing there in the first place? Well, NATO was initially deployed to Kosovo because of what's been described as genocide. Here's some historical footage of German troops engaging what appears to be a civilian vehicle, but was actually Serbs with AKs and hand grenades that were moving to conduct some form of an attack. It's really difficult to tell what exactly they were doing, but pulling the AKs and the grenades out of there seems pretty suspect. Coming up now, 2-minute watch. This is circa 1999. At MG3 spitting.
Munition!
All right, let's bring it up. So again, situation in Kosovo. The official report from KFOR is that somewhere north and around, at last glance, was 25 NATO troops were injured. You guys listened to the report that was being provided by some form of a spokesman, whether that's a commander or a PAO, a public affairs officer, I can't be certain. NATO has been in Kosovo for quite a while, and the situation escalating with Serbs demonstrating violently against those elections that they boycotted was ultimately the catalyst for that attack on NATO forces. I got one more piece of historical footage that I thought you guys might enjoy before we get into our top 10. This one isn't necessarily related to Kosovo. It's not necessarily related to Ukraine. It is Russian related, though. I thought this one might be interesting for you to see. This takes place circa 1992 to 1993, sometime in that area, in Tajikistan. It's Russian combat operations in Tajikistan. It's about a 3-minute watch, and I think you're going to enjoy it. A lot of contextual value here. Winnie the Pugh, thank you for the $5. KFOR 2016 to 2017. Let's go. Only deployment I was ever able to get on. Gunslinger, thanks for the 556. This is why I was asking about the ammo drying up. Serbia getting feisty. Compiled Tech, thanks for the 10. I was recruited by DynCorp all the way back in 2000 to be a UN peacekeeper in Kosovo. KFOR was initially set up to be police-keeping buffer, keep both sides a little apart to cool down. Thanks for that context. Torek, thank you for the $2. The Balkans are a shit show of politics. I'd have to agree. Pontus, thank you for 369. Alexandra, thank you for becoming a Funker member. Welcome.
Немногие из тех, кто уцелеет после этой бойни, прорвутся через заслоны наших войск и уйдут наемниками в Чечню. Там их будут называть также духи. Но пока их держат здесь, потому что здесь тоже война. Те, кто был за речкой, говорят второй Афганистан. Те, кто не был, не говорят ничего. Для них эта война первая, для кого-то последняя.
Мина, блядь. Мина.
Остальные средней тяжести. Понял. Значит, 3 тяжелых, 5 средней тяжести, значит, 100. Минное поле, я так понял. Горд нужен срочно горд нужен. База 29, ГС-91, прием. Говорят, что Куева не представляется возможным, не представляется возможным. Команда стоит передана, прием.
Как ты, блин, прикинь, блин. Да не будет борта это. Харьковчук еще вчера сказал, даже если наш раненый будет, хуй борта будет.
All right, let's bring it up. I need to check in on the support, you guys, because it's continued to flow in. I didn't want to be speaking too much over that. Full bolt on racing, thanks for the 5. Torek, thank you for the $5. Balkans have been a shit show. Ottoman invasions, World War I to World War II to Yugoslavian communists. Lots of bad blood between groups. Thank you very much for the $5, Torek. So I got one more video before we get into the top 10. This is the last one. I just need to, since we took a little bit of time to look at some historical footage, I'm just hoping that everybody in the chat will wake up for a moment.
Ведуться активні бойові дії. Ми зараз захоплюємо ту посадку і ту посадку.
Hope you had your brown pants on.
Знаходимось в точці, де ведуться активні бойові дії. Ми зараз захоплюємо ту посадку і ту посадку.
All right, so I don't think I need to provide any context to that one. Ukrainian speaking to the camera, artillery impacts right behind him there. Terrifying. I watched that and actually a little bit of pee came out when I watched that. So let's get into our top 10 though. So starting off at number 10 tonight. And again, this is the top 10 most watched videos on the app and website that we've had. The very first is going to be a Russian T-90. Taking 3 direct hits. Now, at first glance, when I watched this video, I thought that this might be a fighting position for a T-90, wherein you essentially dig out, a foxhole for your tank. What it does is it really just leaves the turret exposed, but the barrel looks like it's pointed down into the ground. This T-90 looks like it's been abandoned in some way. I don't know if it ran into it or not. Coming up. Number 10. This was published by the K2 54th Mech. We watched their stuff before. The overlay looks fake. The sound is. But the overlay just looks like a DJI overlay. Bring it back up. Now, something like that, we don't know whether or not there was any kind of catastrophic kill sometime later, but what you'll end up having with that is if it's a T90, it's going to have a storage system on it. It's going to have all of those, external systems. Critically damaging those impedes visibility, could keep that tank from being able to be recovered, if you will. Not least including whatever mobility kill or put it in that ditch in the first place. So let's go on to our number 9 video here. This is I would consider this one not safe for work. Discretion's advised. What you're going to see here is a Ukrainian drone that ends up impacting an entire Russian firing line, team-sized element. So, discretion once again advised. You've been warned. Now, a little bit of context about this one. This one was shared by an account that essentially collates funds and provides those to Ukrainian soldiers. Just to provide a little bit of, just to help out with that statement at the end there. The next one, and I see the comments in the chat, oh goodness, discretion advised. That's something that I try to do to keep us in the boundaries of what YouTube supposedly allows, because everything that we're watching here is, it toys with that line, right? The whole reason that we started doing, putting me out here rather than just broadcasting all the footage is YouTube changed its rules. YouTube changed its rules to the point to where putting raw footage out there is now against YouTube's policies without context. So me presenting this stuff to you is our attempt at providing context. If you want to watch this stuff raw, head over to the app. It's always going to be there for you raw under 90% of circumstances, 99% of circumstances. What we're watching here is on the app and website. If it's not, always check the stream description. I might pull stuff from Twitter, right? I link to those sources that I take from on Twitter. This next one, though, another one of those war videos, if you will. Another team of Russians get hit by some form of indirect here. Essentially, they're retreating or moving to more advantageous positions, but they don't make it very far. Discretion advised. Coming up. This is our number 8 most watched video on the app and website. All right, let's bring it back up. And if you guys ever want to go through this yourself, the top 10 videos, all you got to do is click on trending up here at the top. I've still got all the Twitter tabs open that we were looking at earlier. And you can change this. Right now we're using the top 10 over the last 7 days, but you can go to 30 days if you'd like. That'll pop up for you. Or if you just want to look at certain things, you want to see historical footage. We're always trying to refine and change and add to and make the website just that much better. Just a little bit better every day. This is actually a really good watch. Ambush on Russian armored column. Chechen ambush. That's a good one. Let's bring it up. Next video. Number 7 most watched video on the app and website here. This is actually a helmet cam perspective of Ukrainians trying to escape Bakhmut. Retreating from Bakhmut. But they have to drive through what we would describe as a gauntlet. It's about a 3-minute watch, but it's some pretty crazy footage. Coming up now.
Де пацани? Блядь. Та я даю, та блядь. Стреляй нахуй!
куда-то туда. Ебать, экшон. Ебать, проскочили. Тихо. Всі цілі. Кажу, всі цілі.
А, нормально. Все хорошо. Ты что, руку ебанула, а так много.
Пули?
Нет, досколы. Глаза.
Блядь, ты хоть предупреждай, братан.
У меня за ухом вообще ебашь.
Смотри,
А?
да автомат мешает, сука. Скиньте назад его, да. Да, или так. Яй. Да поехали, блядь. Блядь, братан. Я. Все, нахуй, ставлю его нахуй.
Я как раз пустой. Я рожок один выкинул, один, блядь.
All right, let's bring it up. Yeah. Wild ride. Gauntlet is really honestly the best way to put that. Speaking of historical footage, there's footage of a drive through, what this is reminiscent of for me, a drive through, I want to say it was Idlib in Syria. It might not have been. It might have been. I'd have to go back and find that one, but that's what it reminds me a lot of. And I want to say it was white helmets that were driving through Syria, and there's just artillery falling all around them. That's what that reminded me of. Let's go back to the support that we've got coming in over here, and it's a ton of it. You know, once again, I wish I had a more eloquent way of thanking you for it. You know, we're a small team, and just being here first and foremost is all we ask. Maybe dropping a comment in the chat. That's the easiest, best, and free way to support the stream. But thank you guys for the generosity as well. Holy wow. Steve, thank you for the $5. I have 2 videos of Albanian terrorists fighting from 1999. How do I go about sending them to the Funker 530 team? If I'm not mistaken, we actually pulled our submission form down. But one of the easiest ways to get footage to us is to tag us on like Twitter. Twitter's the easiest, is becoming one of the most used platforms for us as a team. Largely because you can link from it, you can easily tag us in things, and we'll see them. Instagram is really difficult. You know, they hide certain parts of your inbox. You know, folks will say, I've sent you messages on Instagram, and I can't find them. I don't even know how to work my Instagram inbox. Twitter is very easy. So if you end up uploading them to Twitter, go ahead and tag us in it, and we typically catch them pretty easily that way. Paul, thank you for the $20. Appreciate your knowledgeable commentary on the videos. I'm just trying to show the videos, boss. Appreciate that, though. Please keep it up, and happy birthday, Ronnie. Once again, not my birthday. Yeah. I actually saw somebody while we were watching that video say, is it his birthday? It's not my birthday. Again, somebody's going to come in one day and think it is, and out of the generosity of their heart, they're going to send in a couple dollars, and then I'm going to be the asshole. All right? It's not my birthday. My birthday is on a Funker stream day, but we'll get there. It's way down the line. Let's move on, though. Let's move to number 6 here. Number 6 is a not safe for work video. Well, I don't know what you do for work, but what you're going to see here is actually coming out of Myanmar. You're going to see an assault team that runs, pretty directly into a landmine. Discretion's advised, especially from an audio perspective. There's an old clip that I've talked about before. At this point, video, the images themselves from I shouldn't say normalizing perspective. But I mean, that might be the best way to describe it. The images themselves, really, really don't get to you after watching so much of it. Audio, however, absolutely can. There's a video that, I think about that lives rent-free in my head from, I want to say here in the States, where there was a dispute between a couple and a man that had been shoveling snow of some kind. And the couple are, being generally bullies to this guy. He goes in his house, he comes back out, and that couple's no longer with us. The audio from that video just lives in my brain. Here's that footage from Myanmar. 3-minute watch. This is our number 6 most watched video on the app and website. Let me see if I've got quality change here. I do. Yeah. These are anti-junta, so opposition forces. Hey, di mana? Apologies, I just got here, but what exactly are we watching? Well, right now, just for some context, we're going through our top 10 most watched videos on the app and website. So that was number 6, and that was in a anti-junta assault team, essentially the opposition to the authoritarian military that took over in Myanmar in 2021. that runs directly into what appeared to be an anti-personnel mine of some kind. Let's move on to number 5, though. So I mentioned we were going to see more from the 3rd Assault Brigade in that southwestern Bakhmut localized counterattack, essentially barreling through Russian positions. I got really no other way to describe that. Video's coming up for you now. This is our number 5 most watched video on the app and website.
Що, пошліть?
Ми зараз нероних посадці не бачимо.
Should have given you the discretion advised. Discretion is advised for this one.
Що? В мінах? Пулеметчик криють посадку, а ми заходимо. Плюс ми другі чистимо. Крий, братан. А ну. БПЛА Дацику. Глянь, де ми закріпилися тут на бліндажах. І глянь, які далі є окопи. А я заїбався нахуй уже. Да?
Просто старый для этого дерьма.
Я старий для этого дерьма нахуй.
Вірно, я кипиш на зв'язку, я прийняв. Прийняв, ключ, розбираю на 5.
All right, let's bring it back up. Again, that was the 3rd Assault Brigade from Azov. Got a bunch of support I need to get through here. Once again, all I can say is thank you. I wish I had better words for it. Stevie, excuse me. Thank you for the 7 months. Michael's Gameplays. Thanks for the 615. Do you think there will ever be a time when we're not at war with each other? Question mark. Also, happy birthday. First and foremost, not my birthday. Second of all, no, I don't. You know, I don't know that there's really ever truly been a time in history where one group, nation, set of people wasn't fighting another for something. You know, war is a part of us. I mean, it is. It is war is politics. War is in our nature, right? Whether it be competing beliefs relative to religion, culture, what have you. So I don't know that will ever be the case. What starts to get interesting goes into like philosophy and theory, which are far above my pay grade. I'm an enlisted dude making talking about videos on the internet. But what starts to get interesting is the threat of what wars look like the further down the technological path that we go. Where does AI fit into war? Where do nuclear weapons fit into war? Is there truly in a nuclear fight not going to be a world anymore? There are some that kind of take the extreme of both directions on that. There are some that actually believe that a nuclear war doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world, largely because most strategic nukes have their locations set, they're predetermined targets, if you will. So imagine all of the United States' nuclear arsenal. Each one of those that is, on the ready knows where it's going to go when somebody hits a red button. The same thing would theoretically be true for Russia. But the further down the, technological path we go, including AI, and there's this really weird story. I shouldn't say weird, but there is a story that's making its rounds right now of a computer simulation of, I want to say it was an AI drone that had been programmed to kind of go and engage targets. It's computer simulation. And what ended up happening is when it would ask for permission to fire, sometimes it would be given approval to fire, sometimes it would not. In the situation where it would not be given approval to fire, since it knew that it would score more points for firing and, you know, destroying its whatever it was that it was supposed to fire on, it would kill the operator so that the operator could no longer tell it not to fire. That's terrifying. That's absolutely terrifying to me. You know, these are concepts and, you know, theories, philosophies that are just well above my pay grade, man. You know, I'm somewhat of a simpleton, try to be a mile long and an inch deep on lots of different topics. But I absolutely enjoy listening to those that, you know, have spent their lifetimes and careers in understanding the critical paths that war takes us, that improvements. And what's also interesting to me is seeing the evolution of war while it's still not truly ever really changing. A great example is trench warfare that I've talked about before. We still see trench warfare happening. What we have now, though, is precision weaponry. So not only are you locked in that stalemate from a small arms fire, from a direct fire perspective, but now you have robots that can just fly over no man's land and, you know, drop a grenade in your lap, or multiple launch rocket systems that can impact within a 5-meter radius, a CEP of 5 meters. So you've gridlocked your infantry into these trenches, and suddenly you have these insanely accurate precision missiles. What does that look like 100 years from now? Right? I don't know. It's crazy. You know, like I said, we're getting into like deep stuff. I'm really here just to show you footage that's coming from all over the globe, whether it be in Ukraine, in Myanmar, like we just watched, in Iran, in Libya. There's actually a footage on the homepage from Libya. It actually kind of looks more like a Command and Conquer cutscene. Maybe we'll watch that one towards the end, though. All right, let's move on to our next one here. So this next one is actually something that we covered earlier. This was one of those raids into Belgorod. And the reason I didn't have this one listed up there is we were going to be watching it down here. It's essentially a rocket drill that the Freedom of Russia Legion is using against what is reportedly a Russian convoy in Belgorod. This is our number 4 most watched video on the app and website. No audio on this one right now. Now, some interesting context with this one that, of course, I can't validate, that I happen to see some accounts on Twitter that are a little bit more in the know given their proximity to Ukraine, and in this specific instance being in Ukraine. This was originally reported by Russia to be a drone strike on this convoy. Now, this propagated sometime after as evidence that it was not a drone strike on this convoy and that it was actually a rocket attack. Steve, thank you for the $5. I don't have social media. Is there another way to send videos? Perhaps send them to admin@funker530.com. All right, let's bring it up. Pontus, thank you for the 462. We're the masters of AI like cows are our masters. I don't even understand what that means. You know, again, I'm stupid. No, we're here to collate footage. For a long time, you know, folks consider this stream some form of like a newsworthy update, if you will, and you know, bouncing a lot of heavy hitter questions. And you know, over the last 6 to 7 months, something that I've tried to reiterate over and over again is the function that we want to provide is really just provide you a location that you know you can go to, the app, the website specifically, where you can watch this stuff at any time, right? I'm doing my best to start to understand some of these complex topics. And in the process of doing so, I hope I'm able to, you know, articulate the things that I'm learning and maybe in a way help some of you learn something along the way. But I am not an expert on nearly any of this. I'm not an expert on Ukraine. I'm not an expert on Russia. I'm not an expert on the Balkans. I'm not even an expert on, my target set for during the global war on terror. Right? I'm much more of a generalist, if you will, a mile long and an inch deep, and that's kind of the way I like to keep it, because we touch so many different conflicts, so many different wars, that at least having a strong understanding of the foundations of the basics is something that I think is very helpful for me. And as we get footage of new conflicts, new engagements, new use of force, I will grow. And as we do as a team, that's what we hope this show can be used for, is to grow at least a foundational understanding of why things are happening. But at its core, this show is really just designed to show you what we see in the environment, what we have available on the website. That was, what was that? Number 4. All right. So this next one's going to be a difficult watch as well. This next one, our number 3, most watched video on the app and website. You're going to see a Ukrainian buddy team attempt to take a Russian-held trench. Now this takes place after a series of small arms and grenades, and it doesn't go well. Right? Thus is the challenge of trenches. I've got some interesting context, or at least an interesting discussion to have with you at the end of this, though. Video's coming up for you now. Discretion's advised.
Живцев идет новый отряд вражеских штурмовиков. Видимо, думают, что знают схему обороны наших сил. Завязывают бой на короткой дистанции. Противник достает козырь. Во время перестрелки вражеский дрон пытается сбросить боеприпасы в наших бойцов. Те пытаются очередью сбить коптер в небе. Наши ребята ранены. Боевики решили для себя, что выиграли в бою, подходят к нашим позициям спокойно, в полный рост. И только теперь начинает работать наш пулеметчик. Подпускал ближе. Уничтожены. Гранату, которую наш раненый боец приготовил, чтобы подорвать себя и не попасть в плен, в итоге бросает во врага.
Стоим до конца, до последнего.
Okay, so, whoa. What just happened? Stand by. Back up here. So, what you just watched there, just to reiterate, we got to go back to full screen here to help you understand what we're going to talk about. Was a Ukrainian element, a Ukrainian buddy team, essentially assaulting a trench, a Russian-held trench. Okay? Towards the end of this video, there's a very interesting scene here where Russians are essentially giving some form of an interview. Now, if I understand this situation correctly, the way that was presented was that those two that you see there are supposed to be these two here. What's most interesting to me, though, is this guy right here. He's actually slumped over in that trench and appears to have expired. Let's watch that portion of the video here. He is not moving. Now, supposedly, there is a longer version of this video where a drone drops a grenade on these two as well. So what's the relevance of that, Ronnie? Well, this scene is bullshit. That is what it is, right? Last stream, if you guys weren't here for it, we took a look at footage from both perspectives, from a Ukrainian perspective as well as from a Russian perspective of what I personally believe to be fake footage. Now, is that something that should be held against, either Russians or Ukrainians for essentially information warfare? No, because that's something that every country will do. Every organization, every, group of people that are fighting another people will use deception, will use information warfare to their advantage. It is actually what I made a living doing for the United States Army. That's the additional context I wanted to provide with that. There is, I'm told, a longer version of that video, and that alone would obviously make that last portion of the video bullshit. But even if there weren't, that front Russian there in the trench, he's slumped over. Dude's dead. That's the way I'd look at that. What are your thoughts? Kevin, thank you very much for the $5. Appreciate that. Now, number two on our list, I can't show you. I can't show you. When I tried to upload this number 2, and I'm going to give you the link for it here if you want to watch it. This is very graphic video of those NATO troops that were wounded, excuse me, in Kosovo. When we tried to upload this to YouTube, we received a copyright strike. So obviously, were I to show you that here on YouTube on the live show, we would also receive another copyright strike. Just to give you a peek behind the curtains, copyright strikes are different than copyright claims. And I actually misspoke. It's not a copyright strike, but it effectively pulls the video down. So you have copyright claims, then you have this weird gray area of copyright where it doesn't strike the channel and it's not an official claim, wherein for a claim, the claimant would receive any revenue from the stream or from the video. It was pulled down. So what it would effectively do by me showing that to you right now is pull the VOD down. An overwhelming majority of the views of this show happen after the live show. And I don't want to do that because I know there are folks that like to chime in or that like to watch it after the fact. I gave you the link. The link is also in the stream description. It's a pretty graphic video. I want to say it was Radio Free Europe that owns the rights to that footage. Anyway, link's in the description. I just dropped it in the live chat. Go take a watch. It's pretty powerful stuff. Give you the link again. Now, again, I see comments in the chat. You know, I missed the link already. It's in the stream description as well. Right? All right, let's move on to our number 1 most watched video on the app and website. This is going to be a difficult watch. This takes place right here in the United States. And more specifically, it takes place in Charlotte, North Carolina. Not going to describe the video for you. We're going to watch it. And then we'll come back up and talk about it. Discretion advised. All right, let's bring it up. So again, that took place in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, if I remember correctly, and this is one of those videos that I strongly recommend you check the stream description, go over and read the description on the website, which I'll pull up here in a second. Cole wrote this one up. Gives a lot of great context and detail to it. The bus driver sustained a gunshot to the right arm. The armed passenger was hit in the abdomen. Both survived. The driver has been terminated from his employment, but is alive. And the passenger/suspect is out of jail on a $250,000 bail. So, something that we always try to do for the context and information that we have available is give you as much of it as possible. Let me check in. I've got one more video to show you guys as we close things out here. But I want to check back in on the support that you guys are sending across, and thank you once again very much for it. London Water, thank you for the $5. Love you, Ronnie. Love you too. Welcome to Costco. Nebraska Because, thank you for the $5. We have a good guess about the amount of blue-on-blue casualties for the Russians. No, I have no idea. From a casualty perspective, when it comes to Russia, nobody knows about Russia. Nobody knows. Ukraine doesn't know. I can guarantee that it's almost... they have a better understanding than we're going to, but Russia is going to be the only one that truly knows. Now, historical precedent would dictate that they're going to probably under relay those. But I would have no idea. None whatsoever. Super Steve, thank you for the $5. Maybe you covered it, but I wasn't here. Have you seen the Russians fighting Russians in Russia? Yeah, absolutely. So I would recommend going back and starting the stream. We started off pretty heavily with Belgorod and lots of footage from Belgorod, and we covered an additional, the rocket drill, if you will, on the supposed Russian convoy in Belgorod. Freedom of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps, more specifically. That was at the beginning of the stream. Thank you very much for the $5 there. Kevin, thank you for the $5. Pontus, thanks again for the $4.62. All right, guys, I got one more video for you. One more. But I'd like to remind you guys that you need to get out there and train, especially based on the video we just watched. Just don't train like this guy. But I'm going to leave you with this video. I'll be jumping over to the other stream over there where we're going to kick back, have a beer. I'll probably have a bourbon. I ran out of beer. And you guys are welcome to swing by and I'll field questions about Funker, about some other projects that I've got going on right now. The stream will automatically redirect you over there. But that's going to be it for tonight's show. I appreciate you being here. We'll see you next week at 6 o'clock for the combat footage show and more from around the world. Stay informed.
Corta. Corta. Arma corta. 1, 2. Ahora sí. Chinga tu madre. Corta. Arma corta. 1, 2. Ahora sí. Chinga tu madre.